When everyone thought she'd steal the cash like the last three did, the new black waitress stared at the open safe, diamonds, gold, stacks of money, then did something no one saw coming. Not even the billionaire hiding behind the door. It had been 2 weeks since Tiana Brooks stepped off the Greyhound bus in Kendleton Bay, a quiet coastal town tucked along the South Carolina shore. She had no family there, no roots, just a suitcase, a second-hand phone, and a promise she made to herself. "You're not going to mess this one up." She found a small room above a florist shop that smelled like wet soil and lavender. The walls were thin, the mattress sank in the middle, and the shower never got fully hot. But it was hers. After years of bouncing between cities and second chances, Tiana didn't need much, just a shot. That shot came in the form of a laminated sign taped to the window of the Mariner's House, the most expensive restaurant in town. "Now hiring? Kitchen, waitstaff, front desk, inquire inside." She almost walked past it. Places like that didn't hire girls like her. But her stomach was louder than her fear, so she walked in. And that's when she saw him for the first time, Chase Whitaker, owner of the restaurant empire that bore his family name. Early 40s, clean-cut, tall, always in sharp navy suits, and with a face that rarely smiled unless it was for a headline. He didn't believe in second chances, not for employees, not for anyone. He had built his life on numbers and patterns. He trusted data, not feelings. After being burned by a former partner and by 2 ex-employees who'd robbed his business blind, he believed people couldn't resist easy money. So he started testing them, quietly, systematically, one by one. The last 3 hires, all failed. One walked out with a roll of hundreds in her apron. Another had stuffed a Rolex into her purse. The third, well, she never showed up again after her training shift. So when Tiana walked into that marble-floored lobby, with her borrowed blouse, scuffed shoes, and a quiet, "Hi, I saw the sign," Chase didn't see potential. He saw another test subject. But something in her voice, the way she didn't fidget, didn't oversell herself, made his assistant raise an eyebrow. "She's different," the woman whispered. Chase didn't answer. He just nodded once. She was hired on the spot. The first few days, Tiana barely spoke. She showed up early, left late, kept her head down, and cleaned up messes she didn't make. Other waitresses talked behind her back. Some rolled their eyes. One joked, "Bet she doesn't last a week." But every time she felt the heat rise in her throat, Tiana would close her eyes and remind herself, "Don't mess this up." Meanwhile, Chase watched her, not directly, never too obviously, but through cameras, quiet observations, and whispered questions. He saw how she treated the rude guests, how she gave half her dinner break to the dishwasher with sore feet, and how she'd return every misplaced dollar left on a table. Still, data was data, and tests were tests. On the 7th night of her shift, long after closing, Chase left the back safe wide open. Inside, more than $20,000 in cash, a diamond necklace from a supplier, a few gold bars used for promotional gifting, and a hidden camera aimed right at it. He walked out, locked the front, and waited in the shadows of the office hallway. Moments later, Tiana came around the corner, holding a tray of wine glasses. She stopped, froze, stared into the open vault. Her hand trembled slightly as she put the tray down. 1 step, 2. Her eyes fixed on the glint of the diamonds. And then, she didn't move. For what felt like forever, Tiana Brooks stood in front of the open vault, her breath shallow, heart pounding. It didn't look real. The money, the diamonds, the soft golden glow reflecting off velvet trays and cash stacks. It looked like a dream, or a trap. Her fingers twitched at her sides. She stepped closer. In the silence of the restaurant's back hallway, her shoes made no sound. The air felt heavier there, like it knew what this moment was. One more step. And now she was standing directly in front of the open safe. The cash was loose, tempting, unlocked. She bent down, slowly, and reached inside. Behind the glass office door, Chase Whitaker held his breath. His jaw tightened, arms crossed. The security monitor showed her every move in real time. This was it, the moment where the mask would fall, where he'd see who she really was. No one gets this far without taking something, he told himself. Tayana touched the stack of cash, but didn't pick it up. Her eyes shifted. She saw the diamond necklace, elegant, curved, like it belonged to someone who'd never had to borrow anything in her life. She picked it up. Chase's heart skipped. His throat tightened. There it is, he thought. But then, she smiled. Not the smile of a thief, the smile of a woman remembering something. She turned the necklace in her hands, slowly, like it was delicate. Then she sat down on the edge of a crate nearby, still holding it, looking at it. And she whispered to herself. On the monitor, the audio was muted, but Chase leaned in, reading her lips as best he could. 2 words, over and over. Mama's locket. His brow furrowed. Then, carefully, reverently, she placed the necklace back inside the safe. Every piece of it. She didn't touch the cash, not once. She stood, closed the safe door slowly, gently, and then took the tray of wine glasses and walked away. Chase stood frozen, not from anger, not from disappointment, but from something else entirely. Guilt. If you felt something just now, even a flicker of it, don't just sit there. Subscribe. These stories aren't just words. They're real hearts in motion, and if you're still watching, yours might be one of them. Back in the dishwashing station, Tayana exhaled and splashed cold water on her face. She didn't know she was being watched. She didn't know someone had set her up. All she knew was that necklace reminded her of the one her mother used to wear, back before everything fell apart. It wasn't just about honesty. It was about memory, loss, respect. But for Chase, it wasn't about money anymore. He'd watched 3 people take from him without blinking. And now, here was a girl who had nothing, and still chose to walk away. The test didn't reveal her truth. It revealed his own. He realized he had built his empire on suspicion, on control, on assuming the worst in people. But maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong. For the first time in years, Chase closed the monitor, leaned back in his chair, and didn't feel angry or cynical. He felt curious. The next morning, Tayana showed up for her shift the same way she always did, 10 minutes early, headphones in, apron crisp, hair tied back tight. But something felt off. Not outside, not with the customers, not even in the kitchen, where the usual chaos reigned. It was in the air, in the way people looked at her, subtle, too subtle to call out, but loud enough to feel. The hostess, Devon, stopped talking when she entered. 2 waiters whispered near the espresso bar, eyes flicking in her direction. One of the sous chefs offered her a half-smile she couldn't place. Chase. He didn't speak to her at all, but she could feel his eyes on her, every time she crossed the floor, every time she restocked glasses, every time she wiped down a table. Like he was trying to figure her out. Had someone told him something? Did they know about last night? Her stomach twisted. Did I do something wrong just by seeing what I saw? Back in the office, Chase sat at his desk staring at the safe. Closed, locked, untouched. He'd watched her. He knew she hadn't taken anything. So why couldn't he stop thinking about her? He tried to do what he always did when emotions threatened logic, bury himself in numbers. But the numbers didn't help today. Not when he remembered the way she looked at that necklace. Not when he remembered her whispering Mama's locket, like the diamonds had somehow brought her back to a different time. She hadn't passed a test. She'd broken something in him. Something he didn't even know was there. He pulled up her file. Sparse. Just an address, phone number, and a line about limited previous employment. No family contacts listed. He closed it quickly. This is ridiculous, he told himself. She's an employee, that's all. That afternoon, Tayana stood behind the bar polishing wine glasses when Chase finally came out of the office. He didn't say hello. He just passed by on the way to the front, but she could feel the air shift as he walked past. Seconds later, the bartender leaned toward her. Careful, he muttered with a smirk. The boss has his eye on you. She stiffened. What do you mean? He shrugged. Nothing, just heard he's testing people again. Don't get caught in the blast radius. Her blood turned to ice. So it was a test. He did set me up. She didn't say a word, just nodded. Then turned back to the wine glasses, hands shaking. That night, back in her tiny upstairs room, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. The voices from downstairs, the florist couple arguing over invoices, buzzed like static. She couldn't sleep. All she could think was, why would he test me? Why would anyone look at me and expect the worst and worse? Why did it still hurt even when I passed? Inside his penthouse across town, Chase poured a glass of whiskey and stared at the city skyline. He had everything. Money, restaurants, investments, freedom. And yet here he was thinking about a waitress who had nothing, and still gave him a reason to feel something. For years he thought being let down was inevitable, that people took what they could if you weren't watching. That trust was naive, but she didn't take. And now he couldn't stop wondering, what kind of woman walks away from temptation with her head held high? They both went to sleep with questions burning in their chests, and neither of them knew that circumstances were about to force them closer than either wanted. Friday night at the Mariner's house was always chaos. Reservations booked out 2 weeks in advance. A live-string quartet in the lobby, wine flowing like water, wealth in every booth. And tonight, the head manager called in sick, which meant Chase Whitaker, the owner, had to step in. He hated doing floor work. But the restaurant was short-staffed, the reputation was on the line, and one wrong Yelp review could cost them 5 figures. At 6:05 p.m., the place was packed. The hostess was overrun, the kitchen backed up, and a tech glitch shut down the POS system. No one could run orders. Chase rolled up his sleeves. He rarely spoke to staff on the floor. But tonight he was directing traffic, resetting tables, even wiping down menus. And that's how it happened. Tayana, carrying a tray of water glasses to table 14, turned a corner and slammed straight into him. Glass shattered. Ice cubes scattered across his shirt. Water soaked his chest. Her face went pale. I'm so sorry, she gasped, eyes wide. Chase blinked, then looked down at his soaked button-down. Slowly, he reached for a napkin. It's fine, he said, voice even. Other staff members froze, watching. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't embarrass her. He just said quietly, "Follow me." They stepped into the back hallway near the wine cellar. The lights were low, the sounds of the restaurant dulled behind the door. Tayana stood stiff, ready to be fired, but instead, Chase leaned back against the wall, sighed, and said something she didn't expect. "You always hold your breath when you're scared," she frowned. "Excuse me? You did it the night you saw the safe too." Her stomach dropped. So he did know. He was watching. She straightened her spine. That was a test, wasn't it? He didn't deny it. "Yes," he said, "and you passed." The silence between them thickened. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why would you do that to someone you don't even know?" He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he didn't see a test subject. He saw a woman who carried the weight of disappointment like it was stitched into her skin, a woman who'd been expected to fail so many times, even not failing felt like punishment. "Because I've been wrong about people before," he said quietly, "and I wanted to know if I still was." She looked away, jaw tight. "You didn't have to humiliate me to find that out." "I wasn't trying to humiliate you." "No?" Her voice broke just slightly. "Because I haven't stopped feeling like a suspect since the moment I walked through your door." That hit him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For a few seconds the silence said more than words could. Then Tayana turned to leave, but he stopped her with one soft sentence. "You reminded me of someone I used to know. She wore a necklace like that one." Tayana froze. "My mother," he added. "She was honest, to a fault. I forgot what that looked like." She glanced back, surprised, and for the first time, Something shifted. Not forgiveness, not connection, but understanding. They didn't speak again that night, but something unspoken passed between them, in glances, in pauses, in the way Chase silently refilled her tray mid-shift without a word. For the first time, it didn't feel like boss and waitress. It felt like two people, stuck in the same storm, just trying to breathe. 3 days passed. No more tests, no more accidents, just quiet tension that settled like dust between them. But Tayana felt it every time she walked by his office door, cracked open slightly more than usual. She hadn't planned on staying this long. This job was supposed to be a stepping stone. Save up, move on, disappear again. But something about this place, the rhythm of the kitchen, the candlelight on the tables, the way Chase hadn't fired her after the water spill, made her pause. Maybe for the first time, she didn't want to run. Late Wednesday night, she stayed behind to restock the linen cabinet. Everyone else had gone home. Chase was still in his office, pretending to read reports. He heard the soft clink of silverware from the back hallway and got up without thinking. He found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, folding napkins into crisp triangles. "You should have clocked out an hour ago," he said. She didn't look up. "I don't like going home when it's too quiet." He leaned against the doorframe. "Do you live alone?" Tayana hesitated, then softly, "Since I was 16. That stopped him cold. She continued folding. One napkin, then another. "My mom died in a fire. House burned down in minutes. They said it was electrical." Her voice was flat, detached like she'd told the story too many times. "I was at school when it happened. She was the only person I had." Chase didn't speak. "I stayed in a shelter for a while, then bounced around. Never stayed anywhere long enough for people to ask questions." She finally looked up at him. Her eyes were dry, but her hands trembled as she reached for another napkin. "After a while, you start to believe you don't deserve stability." He walked in, quietly sat on the floor across from her. "You do," he said. No hesitation. She shook her head. "People see a girl like me, black, alone, poor. They don't see someone trying. They see someone surviving. And they assume that means stealing." He felt that, because he had assumed it too. And suddenly, the test, the safe, the watching, it all felt ugly, small, like punishing someone for being exactly who the world forced them to become. If you're still here, as if that hit you even a little, don't walk away empty. Subscribe. Don't just watch stories like this. Carry them, share them, let them matter. They sat in silence for a while. No music, no staff. Just the sound of two people trying to make sense of themselves. Then, gently, Tayana reached into her apron pocket and pulled something out. A tiny, warped locket, burned around the edges. "This is all I have of her," she whispered. "Found it in the ashes." Chase took it in his hand carefully, like it might break. Inside, a faded photo of a smiling woman holding a baby girl. "I thought your necklace looked like this," she said, voice breaking. "That's why I couldn't move that night. It felt like my mom was watching me." He looked at her, speechless. It wasn't just integrity. It was memory. It was grief. It was love. And he had turned that into a trap. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For the test. For all of it." She gave him a half smile. Tired. Forgiving. "You're not the first. But I want to be the last," he said, before he could stop himself. Their eyes met. And for a moment, just a flicker. There was no billionaire and waitress. Just Chase and Tayana. Two people who'd been hurt and were tired of running from it. It started with coffee. 2 days after that quiet conversation on the linen room floor, Chase showed up to the restaurant before anyone else. He never did that. But that morning, he stood by the front window nursing a coffee when he heard the front door open. Tayana. She paused when she saw him. He lifted a second cup from the counter and held it out. She blinked. "Is that for me?" "It's not poisoned," he said, almost smiling. She took it cautiously, sipped, raised an eyebrow. "You made this?" "No," he admitted. "I bribed the baker with overtime pay." She laughed, really laughed, and it startled them both. They sat in the front booth, the one reserved for VIPs, while the sun lit the empty restaurant in soft amber. "I Googled you," she said suddenly. He looked amused. "Let me guess. First result was that magazine calling me most eligible sad man in South Carolina." "No," she smirked. "Second result." They both laughed. It was strange, easy, soft. "So, why restaurants?" she asked after a pause. Chase stared at his cup. "My dad was a banker, wanted me to follow in his footsteps. I didn't." "Why not?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Money's cold. Food brings people together. When my mom was alive, she used to cook these big, loud meals. Everyone was welcome, even the mailman." Tayana smiled. "My mom was like that too, except our kitchen had 2 burners and a microwave." He chuckled. "Bet the food still tasted better." "Always," she said softly. And for the first time she looked at him, really looked, without fear, without defense. He wasn't just the man who tested her anymore. He was someone who knew what it was like to miss your mother so much your chest hurt. Later that day, during the dinner rush, he passed her a notepad with the wine list and whispered, "You got this?" She nodded, confident, at ease. And as she moved through the dining room, poised and graceful, he saw it. The respect of guests, the quiet admiration of the staff, the way she was starting to fit in without asking for permission. That night, after everyone left, Chase sat on the back steps, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, a glass of wine in hand. Tayana stepped out to throw out the trash and caught sight of him. "You always sit out here like this?" she asked. "Only when I need to feel human." She hesitated, then sat beside him. They sipped in silence, watching the moonlight stretch over the parking lot. He glanced at her. "Ever think about leaving this town?" "Every day," she whispered, "but for the first time I don't want to rush it." He nodded slowly. "Me neither." They didn't kiss, they didn't touch. But that night, something moved. Something unnamed settled between them, heavier than attraction, softer than friendship. It was the space where 2 people begin to trust each other with their broken parts. For a moment, it felt like healing was possible. But deep down, they both knew. Peace like this never lasts. And the storm was closer than they thought. It started with a headline. Late Friday morning, while Tayana was arranging outdoor menus, one of the new hostesses burst through the front doors, holding a phone. "Is it true?" she asked breathlessly. Tayana blinked. "Is what true?" The girl held up her screen. There it was, bold, brutal, and viral. Whitaker billionaire tests black staff with fake safe trap. New hire at center of controversy. Underneath, a blurred security still from the night of the open safe. The back of Tayana's head, the edge of the necklace in her hand, and a paragraph of speculation leaked by a disgruntled ex-staff member who had failed the same test weeks ago. The comments were worse. "Exploiting employees like this? Disgusting. She's lucky she didn't call a lawyer. Racial profiling in 4K. Unforgivable." Tayana stood frozen. Behind her, Chase stepped out of his office, their eyes locked. The look on her face said everything. "You used me." She stormed past him into the alley behind the kitchen. He followed. "Tayana, wait. I didn't leak that." "You didn't have to," she snapped, spinning around. "You recorded me without my knowledge. You left jewelry in a safe to bait me. You used me as some morality litmus test for your own trust issues. I didn't plan for it to go public. I would never—" "But you did do it," she said, voice breaking. "You watched me, judged me, and now the whole internet has an opinion about who I am, based on something I didn't even consent to." She stepped back like she couldn't bear to breathe the same air. "I opened up to you," she whispered. "I told you things I've never said out loud. I thought you saw me." "I did," he said, voice hoarse. "Then why didn't you protect me?" The question hit him like a blade. He had built a career on control. He anticipated every crisis, solved every PR nightmare. But this, He hadn't seen it coming, because he hadn't realized how much she mattered until she looked at him like he was just another man who'd failed her. "I didn't think this would blow up," he muttered. She shook her head, laughing bitterly. "Of course you didn't. You thought I'd stay silent, be grateful, like I should be thankful for passing your little test." "Teyana, it wasn't like that." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe you don't mean to hurt people, Chase, but you do, because you think power gives you permission to test the world instead of trusting it." Silence. He didn't argue. He couldn't, because she was right. That night she didn't clock out, she just left. No apron, no goodbyes, no explanation to the staff. And when Chase sat alone in his office 2 hours later, staring at the empty safe on the screen, the one that had started it all, it looked less like a trap and more like a coffin. At home, Teyana sat on the floor of her small room, clutching the burned locket in her fist. The internet was already labeling her the honest waitress, but none of them knew her. Not really. And the only person who did, or almost did, had watched her like an experiment in human nature. She had tried to believe this time was different. She was wrong. Chase Whitaker stood outside the restaurant's back door, the alley empty, the trash bins lined up like silent witnesses. He hadn't slept. He didn't bother putting on a tie. He just stood there, waiting for something that wasn't coming. The article had already gone viral. 3 news outlets requested interviews. His PR team begged him to release a statement. He told them to wait, because the only person he owed a statement to wasn't answering his calls. Across town, in her cramped little room, Teyana Brooks sat on the floor with her phone off, her eyes red and swollen. She'd packed a bag. Not much. A few shirts, the locket, some savings. The bus station was 3 blocks away. It was a pattern she knew too well. Get burned, leave, start over again. But this time, something held her back. She kept hearing his voice in that alley. Not the words, the silence. The way he didn't defend himself. The way his face crumpled when she said he'd hurt her. Most men in power. They lash out, blame, threaten. But Chase didn't do any of that. He just looked ashamed. And that scared her more than anything. Meanwhile, in the restaurant office, Chase pulled out a pen and paper, something he hadn't used in years. He started writing. It wasn't polished, wasn't structured like a speech, but it was honest. "You were right, about everything. I've built walls so high I stopped seeing people clearly, and in trying to prove that no one could be trusted, I broke the trust of the one person who deserved it most. You didn't just pass my test. You passed through something in me that had been locked up for years. I don't want you to forgive me because I want to feel better. I want you to forgive me because you know. I finally see you, and I never should have tested your honesty when it was my heart that needed fixing." He folded the letter, walked out into the night air. No driver, no staff, just him. He walked 2 miles, to the flower shop, up the narrow stairs, and he slid the letter under her door, quietly. No knock, no expectation, just hope. Teyana found it the next morning. At first, she didn't touch it, just stared at her name scribbled across the front. She thought about throwing it away. She thought about packing her bag again, but instead, she read it. Once, twice, a third time. By the end, her hands were shaking. Not because she didn't still hurt, but because she knew. Not many men in this world apologized when no one was watching. Not many rich men wrote handwritten letters to girls who came in through the back door. And definitely not many bosses saw the people they once judged as human. She sat down on the edge of her bed. No tears, just silence, and the beginnings of a decision. Saturday morning came soft and golden. The mariner's house sat quiet before opening, chairs still stacked, wine glasses glinting in sunlight, a stillness that felt like something was waiting. And then, the door opened. Teyana Brooks stepped inside. She wasn't wearing her apron, she wasn't holding her phone. Just a small paper bag clutched in her hands. From his office, Chase Whitaker looked up, saw her walk in like she owned the ground again. His breath caught. She walked slowly, purposefully until they stood face to face. He didn't speak. She reached into the paper bag and gently pulled out the thing that had started it all. The diamond necklace. She placed it on the desk between them. "I figured," she said softly, "if you're ever going to give this to someone again, make sure they know what it cost." He stared at it, then at her. "You came back," he whispered. "I read your letter." He waited. "I don't forgive you." "Not fully," she said. "But I believe you. And I believe you're trying." He swallowed hard. "I am. And if you're going to keep trying," she added, "so will I." A silence settled between them, but this time it was warm, full. Not everything had been fixed, but something had been repaired. A week later, the restaurant's website quietly updated. The About Us section now listed Tiana Brooks as assistant floor manager. No announcement, no ceremony, just quiet progress. She still took orders, still cleaned tables when no one else would, but now people listened when she spoke. And Chase. He still wore suits, still read spreadsheets. But sometimes he made coffee for the staff. And once he told a table of strangers, "The best thing I ever did here was give someone a second chance." On a rare night off, they sat together on the back steps again. Stars overhead. The sounds of the ocean faint in the distance. Tiana leaned back, sipping her wine. "You know what still gets me?" "What?" "That necklace. I didn't even want it. But for a second, holding it felt like someone was asking me if I was worth trusting." "You were," he said quietly. "You didn't think that back then." "No," he admitted. "But I do now." She smiled. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. He shook his head. "I didn't think I'd feel anything again. Then you walked in with those worn-out shoes and didn't flinch once." They both laughed, soft, safe. "Do you believe true connection can grow from even the most broken beginnings? If this story made you feel something, even a little, don't leave without subscribing, because maybe, just maybe, the next one will find you when you need it most." The last thing she did that night, she reached into her pocket, pulled out the charred locket and handed it to him. "Keep it," she said, "so you don't forget where I came from." He didn't look at it. He looked at her. "I couldn't forget you if I tried."